This next watch we're going to work on is another Benrus model. This one's called the Benrus Preston, and it was made around 1952. It has a beautiful waffle style dial, which was very popular in the early 1950s. Gold plated case, gold tone hands. The dial has, I think, yellowed with age. I think it was originally a white dial, but the yellowing has taken on kind of a gold tone that matches the case, so it looks really beautiful, I think. And it's very even across the entire dial, so it doesn't look like it's corroded or unevenly patinaed like some old watches are. Here are our initial Timegrapher readings for the Benrus Preston watch. They're not horrible. It's way too fast, but we could regulate that out. The amplitude is okay. The beat error is too high, though we'd have to fix that. This has not been regulated or demagnetized or anything. This is right out of the package after I bought it. I'm going to go ahead and demagnetize it and see if that makes a change. Here's the Timegrapher readings after I demagnetized it. It didn't make a huge difference. The rate's still around the same. Amplitude's gotten a little better, and beat error is a little less than it was before, but only slightly. So I'm going to go ahead and give this watch a full service and see how it comes out after we clean, disassemble it, clean, relubricate it, and put it all back together and adjust it. I think we can improve on this quite a bit. We can definitely fix the rate, and the amplitude's okay as the way it is, but I would like to get the beat error down lower too. First thing we need to do is get the back off, and this has got a snap-on back, and it's an unusual design. Like a lot of watches made in the early 50s, the movement stays in the back, and then the front of the case comes off with the crystal on it. So you lift the top of the case off, and then the movement pops out of this by simply lifting up on the crown, and then the movement will pop out of it, and you can access the back of the movement then. Now before we do anything else, I want to go ahead and take the hands off of this, and then we can pull the movement out and take the dial off and see the movement itself. I move the hands around so they're overlapping each other. That way it'll be easier to get the hand levers in there underneath them to pull them up without damaging them. I'm using a piece of plastic to protect the dial and the hands from being scratched up by the hand levers. I'm just going to insert those under here, and then slowly and gently pry upwards until I pop the hands off. Oh, those don't want to come off. Oh, here they go. Okay. Hope we got them both off. The hour hand's still stuck, so we're going to try again. Oh, there goes the minute hand. And there we go. I'm just going to drop this off here so I don't risk scratching that delicate dial. Now I need to get the second hand off, and we'll do it the same way. I'm having trouble seeing that adequately on the camera screen. I'm going to do that off camera. All the hands are off now. The next thing we need to do is take the movement out of the back, and it just snaps into place. So I'm just going to kind of lift up gently on the seat. You can see how it kind of wants to pop out of there. Just lift up gently on the crown until it pops out. And there's the back that it sits in. Here's the Watchmaker side of the movement. This movement is very similar in architecture to the movement that was in the other Benrus watch I recently serviced, the Benrus watch with the tuxedo style dial. But this is older. This one's about 10 years older than that watch. And the main difference seems to be the anti-shock system used on the balance wheel. This one has the old-fashioned one that has a cap jewel held in place by a circular spring that is screwed down behind it. So this is the spring here, and it goes up around. It's circular, and it has this long stem that goes back to the screw. And these kind don't have a shock protection on the other jewel for the balance wheel, only on the top. On the bottom one of the base plate, I don't think has any kind of shock protection, because the other watches that I've seen that use that kind of shock protection on old Benrus watches did not. Like the ETA 1220 movement that was used in my grandfather's old Benrus watch that I serviced earlier this year. So this is basically similar to the movement that was used in the watch made in 1962 that I serviced recently, but it's got a different, more primitive shock protection system. Everything else looks nearly identical though. So the other one was based on an ETA 1281 movement, and I think this one's probably based on an ETA 1280 or maybe the 1281. I'm not sure. I won't know until I get it apart and see the maker's marks on the movement base plate. The next thing we need to do here is get the dial off, and there should be dial screws, and right there's where one of the dial screws is, and that looks like it's at the 10 o'clock position. I think the other one should be at the 4 o'clock position. Yeah, there's the other one, and it's at the 4 o'clock position. So I'll go ahead and take those dial screws out, and then we can lift the dial off. I've got both dial screws out, so the dial should just lift off now. And yeah, there it is, starting to separate. Sometimes they get stuck to the movement base plates by old lubricants and such that leaked out of parts of the watch onto the dial. There's the back of our dial, and there's the dial side of the movement. I was right about the shock protection system. There is no shock protection system on the lower jewels for the balance wheel. There's 2 cap jewels down there, one for the balance wheel and one for the escape wheel, and neither of them have shock protection on them. Unusually, this watch doesn't have a dial washer on it either. I'm going to go ahead and lift off the hour wheel here, and then we need to get the stem out. And to remove the stem, we need to loosen the stem retaining screw, which is this little screw right here. Now there's another screw next to it, a bigger screw. That one you don't loosen. That's one of the barrel bridge screws, but the stem retaining screw is that one. Loosen it just a couple turns, just enough that you can get the stem to come out. And it holds the detent lever on, which is underneath this is the detent lever right here. You don't want that to come off quite yet, so we don't want to loosen it too much. Just enough to get the stem out. And I've already done that, so let's go ahead and pull the stem. Now the next thing we need to do is take apart the keyless works, because I want to get the cannon pinion off, and I can't pull the cannon pinion until I get the minute wheel. Because if you pull the cannon pinion when the minute wheel is still installed, the cannon pinion can sometimes damage the teeth on the minute wheel. And so in order to get the minute wheel off, we need to take off the set bridge, which is this big piece of metal here that's covering all this stuff in the keyless works. And it's held on by a single screw right there in the middle. I've removed the set bridge screw, so let's go ahead and lift it off. And now we can take out the minute wheel. And then there's 2 intermediate wheels on this watch. This is just like the other Benrus watch I recently serviced. These are unusual because most wristwatches only have 1 intermediate wheel. But there's one here, a larger one, then there's a smaller one here. I'm having a hard time getting those out. I may not be able to get them out until I get the other stuff in front of them here out. Maybe I can reach in like this. I don't want to damage them by using too much force on them. Oh, here's one. This one here is almost out. There we go. The small one there. Maybe the big one will come out since I got the small one out of the way. Oh, there we go. Okay. Now, next thing we need to do is take out the yoke spring. And the yoke spring is this spring that goes along here, curves around and up against the back of the yoke. And that's kind of tricky to get out. I'm going to have to stick a screwdriver in there underneath the spring and pop it up. And I need to hold my finger over the spring while I do that so that I don't lose the spring. Because if you just pop it up without covering it with your finger, it's going to go flying away and you'll never see it again. I'm going to need a small screwdriver for that. It's loose now. This one is kind of unusual too because most of these yoke springs are shaped like a cane, where this one here has both ends of it are about the same length. Now we can lift the yoke out. That's this piece right here. Okay, the next thing we need to take out is the clutch, which is this piece down in here. There we go. And then I'm going to try to get the, yeah, here we go. The winding pinion is what I'm taking out now. Okay, the last thing in the keyless works to remove then is the detent lever. And it may lift off too. I don't know if I've loosened the screw enough for it to lift off or if I need to loosen that screw some more. Yeah, it's still attached to the screw, so I need to loosen the screw on the other side of the movement again. And that's the stem retaining screw that holds that in place. There we go. The detent lever fell off on my desk when I loosened the screw some more. There's the detent lever. Now we can take the cannon pinion out. To remove the cannon pinion, I'm going to use a pen vise. And here's the end of the pen vise. This pen vise has interchangeable jaws, and I've got the smallest jaws are what I'm going to use for this cannon pinion. The cannon pinion is that post sticking up right there. We're going to put the pen vise over it. Tighten the pen vise. And then slowly and gently pull it straight out. Maybe you can give a little bit of a turn if you want to help get it out. And there we go. You want to be real careful not to pull too hard or to pull it at an angle because you can bend the center wheel post. And that's what the cannon pinion rides on, is the center wheel post. You can see sticking down there through the bottom of the base plate. And there's the cannon pinion stuck in the pen vise jaws. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take off the two cap jewels that are down here as well. Here's one and here's one. One of these is for the escape wheel and one of it's for the balance wheel. I've removed the screws for the cap jewels and taken the one for the balance wheel off. So now I'm going to get out the one for the escape wheel. And they have a little indentation here where you can stick a tool in to lift it out. Like that. Keep these separate from each other. I think that the two cap jewels are not identical in size, so you need to put the correct one back in the correct spot when you reassemble the movement. So you need to keep track of which one is for the escape wheel and which one's for your balance wheel. Interestingly, the two screws are identical that hold these two in. One of the screws looks like the tip of it was broken off at some point, but it doesn't appear to be broken off in the base plate. I may replace that screw with another one because I have some extra screws of this size. So that's something to watch out for when you're disassembling a movement. See if somebody's damaged parts in the past, and if they have, try to replace them with correct parts that aren't damaged if you're able to do so. Okay, now everything is taken apart on this side of the movement. I'm ready to put it into a movement holder, and then we can start disassembling the Watchmaker side of the movement. On the Watchmaker side of the movement, the very first thing we're going to take off is the ratchet wheel. And the reason we're going to take it off is because we can't get the drivetrain bridge and the drivetrain wheels off until we do this, because this covers part of the center wheel there. So we're going to go ahead and take it off first. And while we're messing with the stuff that's on top of the barrel bridge, I'll go ahead and take off the crown wheel and the click as well before we disassemble anything else. I got the ratchet wheel screw off, and now I'm removing the ratchet wheel. One caution with this, before you take off the ratchet wheel screw, make sure that there's no tension in the mainspring. And even if the watch is totally wound down like this one was, there's sometimes a little bit of tension left in the mainspring. So what I did was, before I took the ratchet wheel off, I pushed the click out of the way with a smaller screwdriver while I had a bigger screwdriver in the screw in the middle of the ratchet wheel. And then I let it slowly unwind after the click was moved out of the way until it stopped unwinding. Because if you pull the ratchet wheel off and there's tension in the spring, it can release that spring tension instantly into the movement and damage the other parts of the other drivetrain wheels. You don't want that to happen, so it's important to release the spring tension before we do this. Next part I'm going to take off is the crown wheel. The crown wheel you need to be cautioned about because the crown wheel uses a left-handed screw, meaning that you turn the screw the opposite direction you would normally turn a screw. On a normal screw, to loosen it, you turn it counterclockwise. On a left-handed screw, you turn it clockwise to loosen it. So to loosen this screw, we're going to turn it the same direction we would normally use to tighten the screw. And this is an important thing to remember when you're disassembling the movement, because if you try to turn it counterclockwise the way you would a normal screw, you're actually tightening the screw, and you'll find that it won't move because it's tight. And if you try to force it, you'll just end up stripping the threads, and you'll mess the screw up. So it's important to remember the direction that this screw has to be turned. This is different than all the other ones. That one's pretty tight, but you can see now it's turning, and I'm loosening it by turning it the opposite direction of a normal screw. So we can lift that out. The crown wheel also has a washer in here that's wrapped around the crown wheel post. Or at least it should. It looks like this one might not have one. Okay, there is a crown wheel washer, but it came off with the crown wheel, so that's why I didn't see it. It was still stuck to the crown wheel when I pulled the crown wheel off. And a lot of times that will stay stuck to the little post here that the crown wheel goes on, and if that's the case, you need to lift that washer off as well. Now let's go ahead and take the click off. I've loosened the click screw, so I'm trying to get it off here. And then we can lift the click out. Just like that. And then the click spring is that little copper colored or brass spring in there, that little circular thing. There we go. That can be a bit of a pain to lift out too. Okay, now we can't take the barrel bridge off yet because the center wheel goes over part of the barrel bridge, so we need to take the drivetrain bridge off first and get the train wheels out of the way, and then we can take the barrel bridge. This is held on by 3 screws. There's one right here, one here, and one over here. So we'll go ahead and take those off, and then we can lift this off. The train bridge can be a pain to lift off sometimes because a lot of times it's stuck down to the movement base plate. But there's places you can stick screwdrivers in to kind of gently lift it up. Right here's one of those grooves right there. And then this side down here is stuck down too, so we'll have to try to lift it up from over here by the barrel bridge. There we go. Now it's loosened. Now we can lift it up. And there's our drivetrain wheels. These come out in a certain order because they're stacked on top of each other, so we have to remove the center wheel first. There we go. And then we can take out the third wheel. And then the fourth wheel. The fourth wheel has a really long lower spindle because it's what carries the second hand. So that part of the staff has to go all the way through the base plate and stick out through the dial side for the second hand to ride on. And then the escape wheel comes out next. There we go. Okay, now that we've got all those out, we can take off the barrel bridge. The barrel bridge is held on by 3 screws, which I've already loosened. And it may be stuck down as well, so we can use the screwdriver to pry it up the same way we did with the drivetrain bridge. There we go. Now we can lift out the barrel. And we can also lift out the stem retaining screw. This movement is identical to the ETA 1281 that was in the other Benrus watch that I worked on. The Benrus Tuxedo watch, which I later found out was actually called the Benrus Tyler. That was the model name. I didn't know that when I was working on it. I learned that later. That one was made around 1962, and this one was made in 1952, so there's a 10-year difference here. And as I said earlier, I think the only difference between these two movements is the shock protection system on the top of the balance wheel here. Everything else appears to be absolutely identical to that movement. I don't know which model number this movement is. I've seen conflicting information online. Some places say that it's an ETA 1280 and some say it's a 1281 like my other watch. But I'll know once I get the balance wheel off and can see the maker's information underneath it. So let's go ahead and take the balance wheel off. The balance wheel is held on by a single screw right here. So we'll loosen it and then we can get it off. Actually, there is something I need to do before I take the balance wheel off, and that is I need to loosen the screw here on the retaining spring for the jewel because I need to get that jewel off. Now, you do not want to take this screw all the way out. If you take the screw all the way out, getting the spring positioned correctly and the screw back in place is hard. I had this issue when I worked on my grandfather's old watch that had an ETA 1220 movement that used that same shock protection system. This screw is nearly microscopic. It's not very long, it's really tiny, it's almost impossible to get into the hole while keeping the spring lined up with the hole as well. I almost lost it a couple of times. In fact, I did lose it one time when it fell off and went flying somewhere, and I had to buy another screw for it. So whenever I've done anything else with a movement of that type, I've just loosened the screw just enough that I can swing the spring out of the way and get the jewel off without actually taking the screw all the way out. So that's what we're going to do here. All right, I've loosened it just a little bit. Let's see if I can move it out of the way here. What I want to do is, push the spring out of the way, and then I can pick up the jewel. And I'm going to pick up the jewel using a jewel picker. And this is a jewel picker. It's got a kind of a sticky plastic end on it. And this is so much easier to pick up these jewels with compared to using a pair of tweezers, because they always want to spring off the tweezers because they're so small and thin. You can't lose them with this. It's just so easy. You just touch it, and it lifts right off. Just like that, see? Now, this one doesn't have, the lower jewel that's in the balance cock does not come off on this type of movement. Unlike the Anchor block system, you can't pull out the lower jewel, so it stays in the balance cock. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tighten the screw back down and keep this spring attached to the balance cock. That way we don't lose it when we clean the parts. And then later when we get it ready to put back together, we can put the cap jewel on, swing that spring back in place over it, and then tighten it back down again. Now we're ready to take the balance cock off. I've taken the balance cock screw out, and there's a little slot helpfully provided here for you to stick a screwdriver under. You kind of stick it in and twist the screwdriver to loosen it. Now when you're doing this, you want to put your finger over the top of the balance cock, because otherwise when you do this, it can possibly, when it pops off because it's stuck on there, I've seen the balance cocks flip over and fall down next to the movement, stretching out and destroying the hairspring. You don't want that to happen. So put your fingers over the balance cock and stick the screwdriver into the slot and gently twist it until it pops off the retaining post underneath. There's alignment posts underneath the balance cock here that it sticks into, and they tend to stick to that. Now that we have that loosened, we can stick the tweezers in. There we go. There's our balance cock and balance wheel. Now what we're going to do to store this is I want to gently pick them both up together, flip it over, and then I want to make sure that I have the upper pivot for the balance wheel in that jewel on the balance cock. That way the spring stays concentric. If you have it where it's off to the side, it can stretch the spring if you leave it like that for a while and damage the hairspring. We don't want that to happen, so I'm going to do that off camera so I can see better, but I want to make sure that upper pivot is in the jewel before I store it like that, and then I'll store it in my parts tray upside down like this. The last part we need to remove from the movement base plate is the pallet fork and pallet bridge. The pallet bridge is held on by a single screw, which I've already loosened, so I'll go ahead and lift that out of the way. And then it should just lift off. It's stuck down too, so we're going to have to use a screwdriver. It has a little slot in it too. You can see that slot there on the edge of it where we stick the screwdriver in. You stick the screwdriver in. Instead of prying up, you just kind of twist the screwdriver gently until it loosens up, just like you see me doing here. There we go. Now we can lift it off. It's still stuck on one of the alignment pegs. There we go. And then we can take the pallet fork out. There we go. There's one more thing we need to take apart, and that's the mainspring barrel. So what we're going to do with that is we place the mainspring barrel with the lid facing up, and the lid is on this side here. And you know which side is the lid because you can see there's a little cutout in the lid there. Some people like to stick a tool in that slot to lift the lid up, but I've had bad luck trying to do that. An easier way to do it is to lay it flat on a hard surface like your tabletop, put 2 fingers on the edges of the barrel like this, and then push downward. And the barrel arbor itself will push the lid off for you. I just heard it snap as it came off. You might not be able to hear it on the audio, but it made a little soft snap sound. I don't think it's loose enough. It's not sticking up enough to stick the tweezers in, so we'll push it down some more. Now it's off. You can see it's popped off real well now. Just lift the lid off. There's our mainspring. Something you want to take note of is the direction that the mainspring winds. Most Swiss watches are made this way. The mainspring winds outward that way, in that direction. Japanese watches tend to wind the opposite direction, but it's important to double check just to be sure when you're taking a watch apart, because when you put the new mainspring in, you want to make sure that it's oriented the correct direction or else the watch cannot be wound. Now I want to take this mainspring out. This watch is very old. This was made in 1952, so it's 73 years old. And I have a suspicion that this is the original mainspring because this watch doesn't look like it's ever been serviced before. So I'm going to lift out the center of it here. What I want to do is I want to get it out of there and get the arbor out because it's stuck in the middle of the spring. And these springs tend to pop out violently once you pull enough of it out. So I want to see if I can get the arbor out before we take the rest of the spring out. It's part way out. I don't want to lose the arbor if the spring goes flying. Oh, there it is. The arbor just popped out. There it is. So now we can pop out the rest of the spring. Oh, there it goes. It just popped out now. Okay, here's our mainspring. And actually that doesn't look too bad. It's got the coil on one side that a normal mainspring has, and then the slightly curved straight section that recurves up at the back. But I'm going to go ahead and replace this anyway, because I figure with a watch that's old, it's a good idea just to give it a new mainspring so we'll get better amplitude. And I've got a new one that's on its way. It should be here in a few days. At least it doesn't look like these mainsprings. Like, this is one from another watch that was made in the same era, and you can see it's badly set into a tight coil. That one definitely had to be replaced. So that's it. That's the entire disassembly process. Our next step is to clean all the parts. I'm not going to make a video showing how I clean the parts on this watch because all watches are cleaned using the same procedure. I've got a watch cleaning video that I made that I'll link to in the description for this video. And you can watch that to see the complete cleaning process, how I use the watch cleaning machine, which chemicals I use, pegging the jewel holes, pithing the pivots, all that stuff. All the cleaning steps are shown in the cleaning video if you want to watch that. So the next video I make in this series is going to be the reassembly video, which I'm going to make after I get these parts cleaned and after the new mainspring arrives.